Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixel Village and I am Radhakrishanan. Pixel Village is a place, as you know, where you can come and expect the most complex of photography subjects explained in the most simplest form. At least that's what our endeavor is. So if you have not already subscribed to our channel, please hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell button so that you know every time we upload a new video. Now, the subject for today is probably as old as the digital photography itself. RAW or JPEG? Though this has been one question that has been extensively discussed in various forums and videos and on all possible places, people still have this question in their head popping up every now and then. We in Pixel Village have a very definite opinion on whether RAW is better or JPEG is better. But at the same time, I don't want to force my opinion onto you. Instead, I would like you to look at a small experiment that we're going to do here and understand it, assess it, and evaluate it for yourself. So, what are we going to do? We're going to set up a small shoot. I'm going to hold a color chart in my hand and request Nikhil to take a photograph of me. And we will look at that photograph on the computer and analyze it. And hopefully, at the end of the video, we will have an answer. And as they say, seeing is believing. Over to the setup. So, this is our simple setup. And for this demonstration, I have to make this light a little more contrast here. So, can we switch off the key light that we are working with? Good. So now, as you can see, the light has become very contrast. I have this color chart, which I'm going to place it in front of me facing the light so that we can see what is happening to the colors as well. So Nikhil, can you come and take a photograph? Okay. Thank you, Nikhil. You can move the camera. Let's bring the light back in. So what we did was we took two images, a RAW and a JPEG file with similar settings, and we have it in the computer. And let's look at those images. The images were shot using a D810, which is a 36 megapixel camera. And both the images were shot in exactly identical conditions. In fact, we shot the RAW and the JPEG together in one setting. So we are now looking at the JPEG now, and this is the RAW. When you look at it side by side, well, there is not too much of a difference. But let me tell you, a JPEG is shot as an 8-bit image, but the RAW can be shot at either 12-bit or 14-bit. A JPEG which is shot at 8-bit can record only 256 levels of brightness, whereas a RAW image which is shot at 14-bit can record up to 16,384 levels of brightness, which obviously means that the RAW can record many times of information in comparison to the JPEG, which is shot at 8-bit. So that's one. So clearly from the beginning itself, the RAW is winner by many miles. Now coming to the next one. A RAW file contains data from the sensor as it is. It's not an image just yet. You need to send it through a software to decode those data and present it as an image in front of you. Whereas JPEG goes through an in-camera processing. It applies all the filters and corrections and settings that you have set in the camera already. Which means what you're going to see as a JPEG image right in front of you, which of course that I'm looking at now, is an already processed image. And there is very little room left for me to do any further processing. Whereas the RAW is like a negative. If you understand the film world, it's like a negative for you. You can use it and print it the way you want it. Which means here a RAW image can be processed in a way which you want it. Of course, it also has certain restrictions, but it allows you much more elbow room to process. Let's look at a simple example. Now, I told you in the beginning that we're going to purposely shoot a little contrasty image. Now, looking at this particular image, here the shadow is gone really deep. And to correct this shadow, obviously, Capture One Pro allows you to do a shadow correction by pushing up the shadows. Yes. Now I've gone to almost 90% of the correction done, but still there is no information here around my collar. Let me switch to the raw. Okay. Now this raw, at this point, no corrections applied. Let me make the same correction. Okay. I'm going to open it up and see the amount of information that you've retrieved already. Correct? Let's see it side by side. The one on the left is your JPEG and one on the right is your RAW. Same corrections applied to both images give you a different feel altogether. Now let's see what happened to the remaining part of the image. Let's look at the JPEG. Can you see an ugly banding happening here, which is really dirty? Now let's look at the RAW in the same way. Definitely there is so much more information in the shadow, whereas this is the best I could open up, but still there's so much of muck in the shadow and there is some ugly banding happening already everywhere. Whereas with the raw image, the transition from shadow to brightness through the midtones are very smooth even now. Now let's look at the highlight. Now this is the brightest part of the image and this one is the brightest part of the JPEG. Now what I'm trying to do is to retrieve, get some more information in the highlight area. It's not really burned, it's well within the 255, but still, let me see how much I can retrieve. So first let me try and do that with the JPEG. So the highlight control, and yes, a lot of information is brought back in the JPEG. Now look at what is happening to the raw image when I do the same correction. The control or that correction is much more natural. Now if you look at both these corresponding places, let me give it to you at 200%. Okay, that's 200%. Look at these two areas where there was highlight earlier. I pulled it, but you see the decoloration here? It's because the software is trying to artificially fill in, making lots of calculation, trying to fill in all those details. Whereas here, it was very smooth. The operation was so easy for the software to bring all those information back in. There's no change in color. It's still that bright gray. Now let me go back. Now you can see the difference. It's like my favorite word, day and night. So as you can see, correcting your shadow area is much easier with your raw image than with your JPEG. So it is very evident from these two images. Okay, next is the picture style. The picture style again is burned in, like I told you earlier, it is processed in the camera. So any corrections that you do to it is not really going to go down well with the image. Whereas correcting your sharpness, your clarity and your structure and all those controls are much more easier with the raw image than with the JPEG image. The next important point to be noted is that JPEG gets short in a particular size, whereas because the raw is short as data, while processing, you can increase or decrease the size according to your requirement. Not that JPEG will not allow you to do that, but beyond a point, the quality starts deteriorating drastically. Another important disadvantage in shooting with JPEG is that you have to predetermine the color space that you're going to work with. Whereas in RAW, you have that freedom to select your appropriate or desired color space while doing the output. Let me add one more interesting benefit to the RAW shooter. The RAW image stays indestructible in spite of making so many corrections and adjustments over it. Whereas if you make a correction and adjustment to a JPEG image, you will have to burn that correction into it. You cannot really go back unless you save it as a new file, which means every time you go back to your original file, you have to remember and make all those corrections all over again. With regard to RAW, all those corrections will stay as layers and layers over it. You can add, remove, change, do whatever you feel like at any stage of the operation. So, do you still have doubts? Let me try and explain to you in a real idiot-proof way. Okay, what we have here are 2 bottles of milk. One is whole milk, the other is skimmed milk. And obviously, you know that qualitatively, the whole milk is much better than the skimmed milk. It contains lots of nutrients and tons of byproducts in it. Of course, there is a lot of people who would consume skimmed milk for a reason. In our case, the whole milk represents the raw and the skimmed milk represents the JPEG. Well, the advantage with raw milk is that I can add water to it and convert it into skimmed milk. Like I can make JPEG from a raw, but not vice versa. So who would require the skimmed milk, which is equivalent to, let's say, JPEG? People who do not really require too much processing. People who have to reproduce the image in a jiffy, like a journalist on the field who has to capture the news item and send it to the publisher immediately. Lots of people who use topical items for internet, they all may not require the JPEG. And to the rest, who would like to extract the best out of your camera and create those stunning images, whole milk is the way, raw file is the way to go. Bye for now.